The Jaguar drivers their long-awaited new turbocharged XJR11. There were two of them at BrandsHatch, the first time they'd been seen in Europe, although the IMSA versions had shown up well in the USA already. But as they made their European debut on home territory in England, they were considered so secret that they were hidden away behind closed doors, and the engine cover was never removed in the pit lane. Their performance was monitored very closely, and not just by the TWR team either. And when Lammers qualified on pole alongside the Mercedes of Mauro Baldi, the new Jaguar was looked at even more closely. Row 2 of the grid saw the new Nissan alongside the second Mercedes, while Alain Ferté with Davy Jones in the second of the new Jaguars had qualified 5th, with Bob Wallach next door in 6th. The rolling start was another wild affair as the Jaguars were outgunned in the first 200 yards by the Silver Arrows pair. Baldi and Schlesser stormed off into the lead and immediately became engaged in another of their own private battles at the front of the field. After only a couple of seconds, Schlesser was through into the lead. Baldi was second, the number 3 Jaguar running third, Lammers fourth, with Nissan, Toyota and a whole clutch of ravening Porsches bearing down behind. Joest and Repsol Brum were in the thick of it, as were the 962s of Richard Lloyd Racing, also hoping to run well on their home ground. But this race was already being run from the front. The two silver cars looked as if they were under no pressure from the pole-sitting Jaguar, but it was still early days, especially while Schlesser and Baldi were still deadly rivals on the track. This time it's Baldi who snatches the lead from his teammate. Deadly rivalry was going on elsewhere too. Johnny Dumfries hangs grimly onto the inside line against almost overwhelming odds as the Jaguar leans on him from the side and the Nissan presses in from behind. In fact, the pressure from Nissan was becoming intense. The new car was very quick and very reliable too. In the hands of drivers like Julian Bailey and Mark Blundell, it was fast becoming a force to be reckoned with as Bailey's charge to get to the front of the pack at Brands proved beyond any doubt. If the new car had a weak spot at all, then it was in the chassis, and understeer proved to be a problem all through the season, despite everything the drivers could do with tyre compound, spring rates and all the rest of the hard work that goes into making a race car chassis competitive. Here at BrandsHatch, it was clear that things were not yet sorted. Despite the evidence of speed and performance, Julian Bailey overcooked it, perhaps over-enthused it would be a better word, and sailed off into the gravel at Clearways, hurting only his pride. But he wasn't the only driver to overdo it. James Weaver and the RLR 962 were in the Clearways gravel with Bailey after a bout of enthusiastic overtaking of their own. As the first round of pit stops came along, Mercedes was still in a comfortable 1-2 lead, and reverting to steel discs from the carbon fibre discs that had overheated at Jarama had cured the braking problems. But on the left-hander behind the pits, another group of drivers experienced a different set of braking problems altogether. This little tangle involved the Spice driven by Wayne Taylor, as well as the 962 of Uwe Schaffer and the Joest Porsche of Jean-Louis Ritchie. Although it looked as though everyone got away with it, Ritchie didn't, and this engine fire put him out of the running. He pulled the car to a stop on the grass and escaped safely, but his race was definitely over. Things weren't going that smoothly for Mercedes either, but nothing could stop their domination of the race. By now, of course, they were clearly established as the team to beat in WSPC, and though they and Joest Porsche were running to plan, the same could not really be said of Jaguar. The Mercedes handover in the pits goes like clockwork as ever, and the Silver Arrows car returns to take the lead. But though the Jaguar turbos had proved competitive on power and handling, there were still teething problems. A pit lane fire forced them to pull off the engine cover in public at last, and one of the new cars was out of the race, which meanwhile had developed into another two-way duel between Mercedes and the Joest Porsches, with Baldi the leader for the Silver Arrows. With one car already out of the race, RLR were dealt another blow when lack of brakes put Tiffany Dell into the Clearways fencing along with Weaver's car. And John Nielsen also suffered brake failure. His was at Hawthorns and was fairly heavy, so Jaguar were now minus one of the old cars as well as minus one XJR11. Nielsen reckoned this was the heaviest impact he'd ever had in a Jaguar, the heaviest impact of his career. Fortunately, he was unhurt. With just a few laps remaining, the dramas continued. Dumfries, sharing the Toyota drive with John Watson, ran out of fuel when he was in sight of Toyota's best finish of the year and could have been third. Wallach too was in trouble. His reserve fuel supply was feeding only one bank of cylinders, but the 962 continued running strongly and again proved to be Mercedes' biggest headache. Not that they weren't above creating their own. Bowdy and Schlesser continued their struggle for supremacy at the front. These drivers racing for a team win, but also racing between themselves for the world title, remember. But that eventually proved to be the finishing order. Bowdy, Wallach, Schlesser, David Leslie in the Aston Martin was fourth, Lammers fifth with the new XJR11, and Walter Brun sixth. Alongside Bowdy, Kenny Atchison was a winner for the first time, giving him a point.